It was the kind of cold that made your fingers stiff before you reached the porch. I had just left the hospital, still in the jeans I'd pulled on 2 days ago, still clutching a crumpled paper bag of flowers someone left in Ethan's room, already turning brown. I hadn't slept, I hadn't eaten, but I knew I had to come home. Only the key didn't turn. At first, I thought maybe my hands were just too cold. I tried again. Then I tried the spare key from behind the porch light. Still nothing. The lock held firm, like it had decided I no longer belonged. My stomach dropped. Something wasn't right. I stepped back and looked up. The curtains in the front window were different. The linen ones I had sewn last spring were gone. In their place, thick floral drapes I wouldn't have picked in 100 years. I leaned in, heart thudding. Through the narrow slit in the fabric, I could see boxes stacked where our bookshelf used to be. A pink throw pillow sat on the couch where Ethan always rested his back. A china teacup, one from our wedding set, rested on the coffee table. And then I saw her. Patricia, Ethan's mother. In a navy cardigan, her favorite pearl earrings, sipping tea like it was any other Tuesday. Across from her, folding one of my blankets, was Courtney. They were smiling, laughing. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. Finally, the door opened with the slow creak I knew too well. Patricia stood there, calm, composed, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. She looked me up and down, took in my swollen eyes, the hospital bracelet still on my wrist, the bouquet of dying lilies in my hand. Then she said it. "You don't live here anymore." I froze. The words didn't land right away. I blinked, trying to understand. This was our house. Ethan and I had picked it out together, painted the bedroom together, planted tomatoes in the backyard. I whispered that I was his wife, that we built this life side by side, that I had refinanced the mortgage myself when his startup failed. She didn't even flinch. She said Ethan paid for the house, that I hadn't signed a prenup, that we had no kids, that I didn't really contribute, that the house belonged to his real family. I couldn't speak. My lips moved, but nothing came out. Behind her, Courtney strolled through the hallway holding 2 of our ceramic serving plates, the ones Ethan and I found on our first anniversary trip to Asheville. She said I left the side door unlocked when I rushed to the ER. Said they figured I wouldn't mind. They acted like I was the mistake, like I had never been part of their world at all, like the last 10 years had been invisible. I stood there, frozen on the porch, with a bag of wilted flowers in my hands and my whole life locked on the other side of the door. 2 years before Ethan died, I watched him crumble in the space of a single afternoon. His startup had failed. The investors pulled out. The contracts dried up. He came home and sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the floor like it might give him the answer he couldn't find in spreadsheets or boardrooms. He couldn't meet my eyes. All he said was they might take the house. Ethan wasn't a weak man. He was the kind who kept pushing even when the wheels fell off. But that day, something inside him cracked. He blamed himself, said he'd failed as a provider, that he should have seen it coming. I didn't argue. I just stood there and told him it would be okay, even though I didn't know if that was true. The next morning, I got up before sunrise and drove to the credit union. I didn't tell Ethan. I didn't tell anyone. I used the savings I'd built up from years of freelance interior design jobs, the kind I tucked away quietly, project by project, invoice by invoice. It wasn't much, but it was enough to refinance the house under my name. Just barely. The process took weeks. I filled out forms in the bathroom with the door locked. I answered phone calls on my lunch breaks. I took on extra clients, made late-night sketches by kitchen light, skipped groceries, skipped sleep, all while smiling like nothing was wrong. Ethan didn't know. I didn't want him to know. I wasn't hiding it because I was ashamed of what I did. I was hiding it because I knew how much it would hurt him to need that kind of help. He would have taken it as proof that he failed, that he couldn't protect us, that he wasn't enough. And I couldn't let him carry that shame on top of everything else. So I carried it for both of us. We kept the lights on. We kept the roof over our heads. The bank never came. Ethan slowly got back on his feet. He thought it was because things just worked themselves out. He never asked. I never told him. Not out of pride. just out of love. Sometimes I wondered if he knew anyway. If the way he held me tighter some nights meant he felt the weight I never spoke aloud. But we never said it. It was just this quiet agreement between us. He kept trying, and I kept holding us together from behind the curtain. And now, standing on that porch 2 years later, locked out of the home I had saved, I realized no one knew what I had done. Not Patricia, not Courtney, not even Ethan, really. The house they said didn't belong to me, only existed because I made sure it did. I didn't save it for credit. I didn't save it for leverage. I saved it because that was what love looked like to me. Quiet, steady, invisible if you weren't paying attention, but it was real, and it mattered, even if no one else remembered it but me. The motel room smelled like bleach and leftover smoke, the kind of place where every lamp flickered just slightly and the bedspread never quite lost its stiffness. I didn't care. I sat on the edge of the mattress, still in the same jeans, still holding the same dying bouquet, staring at a TV that wasn't turned on. There were no clothes in my bag, just a phone charger, hospital paperwork, and a paperback I hadn't touched in months. On top of it all was the phone I hadn't checked since Ethan's heart stopped. I pressed play on the last voicemail he left me. His voice came through steady, teasing me about needing rest, promising he was fine. I listened twice. Then I turned it off. The silence after his voice ended was louder than anything else in the room. I sat there for hours, the air around me too cold, the sheets too thin, the stillness pressing down. I kept thinking about the way Patricia had looked at me, like I didn't belong, like grief only counted if it came with blood. I reached for the motel phone. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. A woman picked up on the first ring. I told her my name. Told her I needed to update the guest list for my husband's service. When she asked what changes I wanted to make, I told her, "Please remove Patricia Grant and Courtney Grant." She paused. Professional, but clearly surprised. "Understood," she said. I hung up before she could ask anything else. It wasn't about getting even. It wasn't even about anger. It was the first time in a long time I had said no. A full stop. A closed door. Not because I wanted to punish anyone, but because I was finally done letting people walk through my life like they owned the place. That call didn't make me feel better. It didn't bring Ethan back. It didn't warm the room or soften the bed. But it was mine. That moment, that decision, that line in the sand, it was small. It was quiet. But it was a beginning. I sat back on the bed, arms around my knees, head resting on the wall. The light buzzed overhead. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed. For the first time in what felt like forever. I wasn't waiting for someone else to do the right thing. I had done something for me. And it was enough to keep me upright for one more night. I parked 2 blocks away and walked through the back alley, keeping close to the neighbors' hedges. Patricia's car was gone. Courtney's too. The house looked quiet, but I didn't let myself trust that. I stayed low, slipped into the backyard, and tested the laundry room door. Ethan never fixed the latch. It still opened with a gentle push. The air inside was wrong. Lavender air freshener. Patricia's favorite. The walls were bare where our wedding photos used to hang. In their place were generic landscapes in plastic frames, the kind you'd find at a big box store. Even the couch looked different, pillows fluffed in a way that made me feel like I was trespassing in my own life. I moved slow, careful not to leave prints on the hardwood. My chest tightened with every step. The kitchen was spotless. Too spotless. The hand-painted mugs were gone, replaced with dainty china I hadn't seen since our engagement party. I didn't stop to mourn. I kept walking. Ethan's office was tucked behind the laundry room. No one ever went in there except him and me. Patricia hated the mess, called it his junk cave. That's exactly why I thought it might still be untouched. I turned the knob. It opened. The scent hit me first. Coffee, dust, and Ethan's aftershave. I stood in the doorway, frozen. The room looked exactly the same. Wires coiled on the desk, sticky notes covering the whiteboard, receipts and flash drives everywhere, like his thoughts had scattered and never come back. I stepped inside, letting the door click behind me. For a second, I let the silence wrap around me like a blanket. Then I moved to the desk and started opening drawers. Top one had receipts from a side consulting job. The middle had breath mints, a broken watch, old business cards. I paused, hands hovering over a small black folder wedged between two dusty manuals. Across the front, in Ethan's handwriting, were 5 words: postnup. Do not discard. My heart stuttered. We never signed a prenup. We always said love didn't need paperwork. But I opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were 3 crisp pages, typed, stamped, and signed. Legal letterhead, 2 witnesses, a highlighted clause near the bottom. In the event of the husband's death, all jointly owned assets, including real estate, are to be transferred to Madeline Grant unless otherwise specified in a last will and testament. There was no will. But this wasn't just legal. This was final. Tucked behind the last page was a folded sheet of paper. Not typed, just a note, written with the same pen Ethan used for everything. If Mom tries anything, show this to your lawyer. You know how she is? Keep this safe. Love you, M. I didn't cry. Not then. I just stared at the paper in my hands and felt something shift deep in my chest, like he had reached out one last time to tell me I mattered, that I wasn't alone, that he saw everything I had done, even if he never said it. I slid the folder into my coat, locked the office door behind me, slipped back out the side the same way I came in, and for the first time since Ethan died, I felt something like ground under my feet again. Something real. Something steady. They showed up just after noon. I heard the knock before I saw them. 3 sharp raps, like someone testing the walls to see how solid they were. I peeked through the curtain, and there she was. Patricia, in a tailored black coat, scarf knotted neatly, lips pressed tight. Beside her stood a man in a gray suit holding a clipboard. He looked like someone who billed by the hour and never missed a detail. I didn't invite them in. Instead, I zipped up my coat, tucked the black folder under my arm, and met them outside in the parking lot. The wind caught Patricia's scarf, flinging it sideways. She smiled the way people do when they're sure they're about to win. She said she was here with her family attorney, Mr. Lewis, to discuss next steps regarding the house. Her tone was almost polite, like this was a routine business matter. I nodded once and let her finish. Then I said flatly that I already had representation. Her smile faltered, just slightly. Mr. Lewis cleared his throat and began talking about probate law, intestate succession, and division of assets among next of kin. He used long phrases, but they all pointed to the same idea. Patricia believed she had a claim to the house. That as Ethan's mother, she was entitled to something. I let them talk. I waited until they finished. Then I reached into my coat and pulled out the black folder. I held it with both hands, steady, and opened it just enough for them to see the seal. I told them it was a notarized postnuptial agreement, signed 3 years ago, with 2 witnesses and legal letterhead. The clause in question transferred all jointly owned assets to me upon Ethan's death, including the house. Mr. Lewis stepped forward and asked to review it. I shook my head. He would get a copy through formal channels. I had already retained counsel. His eyes shifted, just slightly, the way people do when they sense a battle turning. Patricia's expression didn't change, but her voice dropped when she spoke again. She said I was never really part of the family, that I had taken her son and now wanted to take everything else. I met her eyes. I said I hadn't taken anything. I had protected what he left, what we built, what she had tried to erase. Then I turned around and walked back toward my room. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need one. The folder was still in my hand, but it felt lighter now. I had said what needed to be said. Not loud, not angry, just clear. And in that parking lot, surrounded by cracked pavement and cold air, the ground finally felt like mine again. It came in the middle of the night, slipped under my door like a threat with no sound. No stamp, no handwriting, just a plain white envelope with my name printed in bold across the front. I stared at it for a long time before I opened it. Part of me already knew it wouldn't be good. Inside was a formal court petition. Patricia had filed a legal challenge. She was accusing me of coercion. She claimed I manipulated Ethan, took advantage of him when he was emotionally unstable, forced him to sign the postnup without full understanding. My hands went cold. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Not because I believed it, because she dared to suggest I would ever do that to him. It wasn't just about property anymore. It was an attack on everything I had done to keep us going, everything I had carried alone. All those nights I stayed up working while Ethan struggled to breathe through failure. She wanted to rewrite our history, turn my love into a crime, make me look like a thief in the house I had saved. I dropped the letter onto the motel table like it burned. Then I picked up my phone and called Jasmine. We hadn't spoken in years, not since college, but she answered on the second ring. I didn't even have to explain. She said she figured I'd call, that when people have no legal ground, they throw whatever they can and hope something sticks. I told her I wasn't just angry, I was insulted. She said good. That kind of anger had weight. I told her I didn't just want to win. I wanted to bury every lie Patricia was about to tell. Jasmine didn't hesitate. Then let's build this right, she said, brick by brick. When we hung up, I sat in the silence for a long time. The letter was still there, face up on the table, like it was daring me to flinch. But I didn't. I felt it then. That shift. I was done defending. I was ready to fight. The courthouse felt too polished, like grief didn't belong there. The marble floors echoed with every step, and the silence in the room hummed with the weight of things that couldn't be said out loud. I sat beside Jasmine at the respondents' table, my palms cold but steady. Across from us, Patricia wore black lace, a widow's costume that didn't belong to her. Courtney sat beside her, eyes lowered. Their lawyer, Mr. Lewis, stood ready with a folder thick with assumptions and theatrics. The judge entered and didn't bother with small talk. She looked like the kind of woman who had seen everything twice and still had no time for nonsense. Lewis went first. He painted Patricia as a concerned mother, talked about Ethan's declining mental health, used phrases like vulnerable state and emotional strain. He never said the word coercion, but it lingered in the air like smoke. Patricia dabbed her eyes. I didn't look away. Neither did Jasmine. When it was our turn, Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't perform. She placed each document down with quiet confidence. The post-nup, signed and notarized with 2 witnesses, financial records showing I had paid every mortgage bill for 2 years straight, utility bills in my name, a letter from Ethan's neurologist, dated just 3 months before his death, confirming he had no signs of cognitive decline. She ended with that. The room went still. Mr. Lewis tried to respond. He said emotions weren't always reflected on paper. That grief did strange things to people. The judge interrupted him. She asked if he had any medical evidence to support the claim that Ethan was impaired. He paused, then said, "No, Your Honor." The judge looked down at the papers in front of her. She read for a moment that felt like an hour. Then she spoke. "The post-nuptial agreement is legally binding. The deed is in Mrs. Grant's name. There are no grounds for contest. Case dismissed." The sound of the gavel hitting the bench wasn't loud, but it landed like thunder. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding, the kind of breath you only release when the war is over. Patricia didn't move. Her face stayed frozen, caught somewhere between disbelief and fury. Jasmine packed up our documents and nodded at me like the job was done. I stood and followed her out of the courtroom, step by step, finally walking away from a fight that had never been fair. But in the end, the truth held, and that was enough. The chapel smelled like cedar and lilies. Ethan would have liked that. The service was simple, quiet, just like him. I arrived early to place the urn at the front, wrapped in blue velvet, his favorite color. Friends from old jobs, neighbors we hadn't seen in years. Even a few clients showed up, offering soft words and hand squeezes that meant more than they probably knew. By the time the minister cleared his throat, almost every pew was full. Jasmine sat beside me, not as my lawyer this time, but as someone who understood. I was folding the edges of the program when I saw them. 2 shadows in the back. Patricia and Courtney, dressed in black, veils pinned just right. They weren't on the guest list. The funeral home had promised to stop them, but there they were, pretending to belong. My stomach dropped, but I didn't flinch. I stood up slowly, walked down the aisle with each step louder in my chest than on the tile. People turned to watch. The minister stepped aside. I reached the back and met Patricia's eyes. Calmly, I told her she wasn't supposed to be here. She opened her mouth, but I kept going. I said she wasn't mourning. She was performing. And if she didn't leave, I would walk out with the urn and the minister and finish the service in the parking lot. The room went still. Then, from beside her, Courtney stood up. Her voice barely carried, but it was clear. "Let's go. Mom, we're not wanted here." Patricia turned to her, stunned. But Courtney didn't back down. She reached for her mother's hand, and this time, Patricia followed. No scene, no shouting, just the soft sound of a door closing behind them. I returned to the front and sat beside Ethan's ashes. The sun filtered in through the stained glass window. I folded my hands in my lap and let myself breathe for the first time in days. And in that quiet, with no one left to steal the moment, I finally said goodbye. Not just to Ethan, but to everything that had tried to take him from me. The morning after the funeral, the house felt still in a way that made my skin tighten. I walked through each room like I was seeing it for the first time, tracing my fingers over walls that had once been ours but had held too many strangers in too short a time. There was no noise, no perfume in the air, just the sound of the floor under my feet and the soft echo of something returning to me. I found Ethan's old gardening notebook behind a stack of cables in his office. The pages were filled with scribbled dreams and seed diagrams, clumsy sketches of rosemary hedges and wild marigolds. He had even taped a packet of seeds inside the back cover. For Mads. "When you're ready?" I wasn't. Not really. But I opened the back door and stepped into the yard anyway. The soil was dry, crusted from winter. I dug my hands in, turned the dirt, and planted every seed he left. Marigolds, lavender, mint. I watered them gently, sat beside them until the sun disappeared behind the roofline, and let the cool air settle over my shoulders. For a few hours, I forgot the courtroom. I forgot the motel, the silence, the letters. I just sat with the earth and breathed. Weeks passed. Spring came early that year. Every morning I stood by the kitchen window, coffee in hand, wrapped in Ethan's flannel, watching the first signs of green rise. The marigolds bloomed first, bold and orange like they had something to prove. Then came the mint, then rosemary, then peace. I didn't hear from Patricia again. No calls, no letters, no lawyers. Whether it was the court order or the silence that came after, I didn't know. I didn't care. She faded, like background noise, when you finally turn off a machine that ran too long. The house became mine again, not just legally, but in feeling. I painted the guest room a soft sage green. I replaced the photos she hung with ones that belonged Ethan by the lake. Our dog Max, a blurry sunset from a weekend we never wanted to end. I started working again, not because I had to, because I wanted to. Small jobs at first. A grieving widow who wanted her kitchen to feel new, a young couple building a nursery, a retired woman who needed more light in her sunroom. I didn't tell them everything, just enough. Sometimes just being in the room, helping them build a space of their own, helped me reclaim mine. And when someone asked how I got through it at the grocery store, at church, in line for coffee, I told them the truth. You don't owe anyone access to your peace. You're not selfish for locking your doors. Sometimes something beautiful grows right where your world once ended. That's not a metaphor. That's survival. And it's okay if it takes time. Some seasons bloom late, but they still bloom.